So you should all be able to see my screen. Excellent. Okay, so this is a discussion, I guess, a workshop a little bit. It's going to be time for you to discuss it as well, but it's about vulnerable congregations. If you just arrived, this is a discussion that started when the 3 congregational support commissions from ARW, Horseshoe Falls, and WOW commissioned Halo Canada and Mike Wood Daly to do a study on vulnerable congregations in our regions. And so he went back to 2012 to 2019 for stats from CRA and wherever else he got all the information. He got lots, and he gave us a bunch of information around that. And the primary part was to be able to identify markers of congregations that could become vulnerable or that are vulnerable. So I'm John Neff. If you don't know me, I'm the Minister for Congregational Support in Western Ontario Waterways Regional Council. I'm the staff support for the Congregational Support Commission.
My name's Greg Smith-Young. I live in the town of Elora, and I am a growth animator now, working out of the General Council, but alongside your Regional Council and staff. And my job is to come alongside you in existing congregations and help you strengthen your invitation to your neighbors, to your neighborhoods, to build connections. Our focus is on inviting, sharing our faith, attracting people to our congregations, welcoming them when they actually come, helping to engage them within congregational life, all towards, I guess, the main focus, which is joining with the Holy Spirit, who is forming people into disciples of Jesus. So then we can all be sent to discover where God's at work in our neighborhoods and in our communities. So that's working with existing communities of faith, such perhaps as yours, but also supporting people who have ideas and visions and callings to begin new types of communities of faith in our region too. So yeah, that's basically what I'm doing.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Greg.
Thank you. Oh, and you can find out about me on the WOW regional website under staff. I'm toward the bottom of the staff listing there, and my email's there if you want to connect with me.
Excellent. Thanks, Greg. So I wonder if you folks, just for my record, if you could type your name and community of faith from which you are in the chat, that would be wonderful. And I welcome all of you here to this meeting that's hopefully going to be a meeting of hope rather than despair. And we'll have some discussion about that. I would like to give thanks to Lynn Allen, who is my counterpart in ARW and Horseshoe Falls, for the initial preparation of all of this presentation. I'd like to do a territorial acknowledgement. A territorial acknowledgement is a way to recognize and respect the Indigenous peoples who have stewarded the land long before the arrival of settlers. Chatsworth, Ontario, where I live, close to in the township, is located on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Chippewa, and Haudenosaunee peoples. It is important to recognize that the land that we now call Canada was taken from Indigenous peoples through colonialism, and that the effects of this history continue to shape Indigenous settler relations today. By understanding of the history, by acknowledging the traditional territory, we can begin to create a shared understanding of the history and present day realities of Indigenous peoples in Canada and work towards creating meaningful reconciliation and decolonization. So as I said, for the acknowledgement then, Chatsworth, Ontario is located on the traditional territory of the Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. And as settlers, we recognize the historic and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples have faced in Canada and commit to work toward reconciliation and decolonization. We acknowledge the responsibility we have to work toward creating a sustainable and just future for all who live, work, and visit here. I'd like to offer a prayer. Source of all light, in the quiet of this moment before our meeting begins, we lift up our hearts and minds. We are exposed, a collective soul seeking solace. Our hearts carry the weight of many challenges, and our spirit trembles with the fragility of hope. Yet in this vulnerability, we find a sacred strength, for it is not in certainty that our faith blooms, but in the tender soil of doubt and fear, where your presence becomes the beacon we seek. Grant us the courage to embrace our challenges, to see in our journey a mosaic of your love. Let the whispers of despair be drowned by the chorus of songs of renewal. May the dawn find us wiser, braver, with a spirit fortified by the relationships we build and the united church presence we build. And as a light of our efforts, as it dispels the shadows, may the path be illuminated with hope. Amen. Amen. If you look out your window, and perhaps the last few days have been a good example of this, and you see dark clouds, you know that it might rain. It doesn't mean it will rain for certain, but there's a chance. And so you plan your day accordingly, hopefully. If you look out and it's completely overcast and you hear thunder, well, there's a higher chance of rain. If you look out and see the water is falling, raindrops falling from the sky, there's no question you need to respond to the weather. Signs don't always mean something will happen. It might rain, it might not rain, but they can be good indicators of changing conditions. It's good to learn to recognize signs so that you can prepare and make good choices. Signs that we're going to discuss, or that were in the recent newsletter also, are not meant to panic anyone, but rather more, it's like a deer crossing sign. Like that sign, it's a reminder for you to pay attention because you're at a place where the risks are higher. Doesn't mean a deer is going to cross in front of you. If a congregation is experiencing 3 or more of these financial risk factors, they're at high risk of closure in the next 3 to 5 years. That's the assessment that Mike Wood Daly did. So the warning signs. Let's start with financial warning signs. An annual deficit for 3 years or more consecutively is a warning sign. Annual expenses that run 30% higher than revenue. Cash and long-term investments less than 3 times the annual deficit. You folks don't have to write these down. I can make it available. I also have an Excel sheet that allows you to put in, check off the risk factors and determine whether or not you're at risk. Property expenses are 30% or more of your annual expenses. Staffing costs are greater than 60% of your total expenses. Sorry, those were the 5 from Mike Wood Daly, and we added the trend of declining income and or increasing deficit is a warning sign. So if you have 1 or less of these, it means that you appear to have low vulnerability. If you have 2, you're at medium risk in vulnerability. Pardon me. And if you have 3 or more, you're at considered at high risk. There are other types of warning signs also to think about when we talk about vulnerability. A vulnerability study really wouldn't be complete if we didn't include volunteers. and or property or our buildings. So we'll take a brief look at those. A volunteerism warning sign is declining numbers of donors and volunteers. I think we can all recognize that we have faced that, and certainly since COVID, it's been hard to get back to the place that we were. Aging membership. I hear this quite a bit, that our church membership population or attendance population is of higher ages, and there's not too many donors on the lower age ranges. The building is no longer suited for the current ministry. Now, this could be a couple of things. It could be that there's the building is requiring too many repairs, and so you can't really keep up with that and ministry. It could be that your current ministry is much smaller than the ministry that was in the church 50 or 80 years ago, and so it's much too big for your current ministries. So it can be utilized differently, or you could look at getting a different building. And another one would be that accessibility upgrades. The costs could be prohibitive. So buildings that are not accessible. We also have, there are more positions to fill than volunteers. One of the first things I ask churches when I'm talking about visioning or future and stuff like that, because they're usually talking about how tired they are and how it's so hard to get people to fill positions. And I ask them, how many positions do you have to fill? The last church I was at had about 70 for all the different things they're doing. And I said, how many volunteers do you have? And they said about 40. I'm like, do you see a problem here? So having way more things to do and not having enough people to do the work in the best way that it can be done. So this is a governance matter, and it also indicates a lack of priorities. So governance should always be strategic and operational. So it's not just doing the day-to-day stuff, but should also be looking at visioning and what the future holds, setting goals and tracking those goals. It also is about setting realistic priorities based upon the finances, the volunteerism, energy level, and building requirements. So it would be better for a church to lessen the amount of things they're doing and prioritize, say, 3 top ones as really, really important. Not that the others aren't important. They're good ministries, but we don't have perhaps the finances and the volunteers to do it. So make priorities and put your efforts into those priorities, and perhaps having let some things go. That way you don't burn out your volunteer base. You don't overwork your volunteer base. Does anybody have this syndrome? I think this is it might be a humanity syndrome. Maybe it's a Canadian syndrome, but it's certainly a church syndrome. So the syndrome is wearing way too many hats. This is also a governance matter, but it's also a personal matter. Let's be honest, it's hard to find volunteers to rotate in positions. So taking it on can seem like a life sentence if you're asked to do something. So the position could be turned and the church could stick by it. So if you have a 3-year term renewable twice, after 6 years, you don't take it no matter what. Somebody else will step up, or it doesn't happen anymore. And then something gets figured out. But there's a personal matter here too, and that is boundaries and balance in life. Sometimes we have to set better boundaries for the things we're asked to do and the things we're capable of doing. And sometimes we have to say no in order to keep a balance in our personal lives and whatnot. So if people are wearing too many hats, then it certainly is a warning sign. And there's no opportunity for others to get involved. This is also about not wanting to give up positions. Oftentimes we hear about the fact that people are in positions forever and there's nobody to take over. But there's other times where there are people, but people don't want to give up positions for various reasons. It could be fear. It could be that the group of people that they've been with so long have become their friendship group kind of thing. So this is where they get their social time. It could be it's about control. But it's whatever the reasons are, it's important to allow for the opportunities for others to get involved. It happens too where others are they would do things differently than what we're used to, so we're less open to new ideas. There are signs. We need to watch for them and make appropriate plans well enough in advance for all of our congregations. The signs, there are financial signs, there are volunteerism signs, and there are building and property signs. I would like to break you off into small groups to discuss what has just been presented. And I wonder if each group, I'll put 5 or 6 in a group, and I wonder if each group could elect someone to take notes, and you can either email them to me or copy and paste them into the chat. And in your groups, if you could describe the signs that you're noticing in your community of faith. And also, if there's time, what other changes are you noticing in your congregation or even in your surrounding community that affect ministry? So just give me one moment to set up these groups, and then I will send you off for, I think, what time are we now? 7? Let's do 20 minutes. I think that means everyone's back. So I wonder if we could just take a few minutes, and there were 9 different groups, and if anybody, one of the note takers or somebody else would like to share, just what are some of the things that you're noticing from your community of faith or in your congregation changes or in your surrounding community. And I will ask that you would raise your virtual hand, because then I can spotlight you so everyone can see you, but I can't probably find you unless you raise your hand. To raise your hand puts you at the top of my list. Okay, thank you, Roz. And oops, you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I get to go first here. Oh dear. So it was very interesting how much commonality there were within the group. And we all had aging congregations, very few young families. If we did have young families, then they were not as active in volunteering. Many people wore hats, many than just one hat, and one interesting comment was that one person, their building is perhaps going to be sold to a group of farmers, and but they will still have use of the building for their purposes. So that takes a lot of the onus and all of the finances. I think many of us had all of the deficits that were being had were being had been managed over years with assets, and many of the congregations don't have any assets left to manage those deficits, so there was some concern. Yeah, I guess that's about it.
Yeah, thanks, Roz. Anne.
Yeah, so our group, most of there were 4 lay reps in our group, and myself, and they all expressed concern about all of those warning signs. Aging congregation for sure, aging buildings, reductions in givings. One group, they seem to be getting enough volunteers for things so far, so But that's a concern with the aging demographic. One of the churches in Atwood, accessibility is a problem.
Mm.
Their washrooms and their education wing are accessible, but the sanctuary and the fellowship hall are not. And so people stop coming because they can't get to the right places. They also lost their musician, and they have to rely on recorded music, which some people don't like. One person expressed concern. She still works full time, so she can't help during the day, or even attend. They get as many people at coffee hour as they do on Sunday morning, because the majority of the congregation is elderly and can come out through the daytime, but it excludes the working families from being participants. What else have I got here? Not having a minister has been a huge issue. One person expressed that they've been without a minister for 2.5 years. And their worship committee's been very active, but it's getting more and more difficult. They're looking for half-time ministry, but aren't sure they are even going to be able to afford that much longer. Another person who is an LLWL did pulpit supply for a couple of years at a church without a minister, and people stopped coming because there wasn't a minister. They now have a regular minister, and there is some hope that people are starting to return. Another concern in rural areas are the Mennonites are buying up all the farms and forcing the rural churches to close because the Mennonites are not coming to the United Church. And that's a problem. And I just wanted to share that I offered to my group a story of hope. So the church I served for 20 years had all these warning signs when I started there 20 years ago. And about 8 years in, they turned things around. We had a really hard conversation. We turned things around. We didn't have another deficit in the time I was there, the next 12 years, and they're still doing well. So even if all those warning signs are there, it doesn't mean you have to close. You just need to address those warning signs and do something about it. Perhaps you can turn things around.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. I appreciate that. We'll move on to Sarah.
So a lot of the same kind of issues that everybody else has talked about. Majority have addressed that 60% of the budget for staffing by cutting their ministers' hours to part-time or half-time or whatever that looks like to help with that particular issue or red flag. Again, non-functioning committees due to lack of volunteers or aging population, drawing down investments in order to continue, and again, running out of assets to do that with. One participant said that the governing practices and setting priorities has really helped their congregation to focusing on, there's more things on the to-do list than volunteers, so prioritizing the most important things. One had a really expensive building that they're dealing with, so trying to prioritize whether you put money into the building or look at other options. Yeah, declining volunteers, aging population, lack of families.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. And we'll move on to Greg.
So there were 4 different communities of faith in our conversation, and again, of course, a number of these signs were common to us all. There was some conversation about fundraising, but trying to sustain a congregation or to support its budget through fundraising runs into the challenge of having enough people to actually do the work of that. 2 of the congregations were, one is an amalgamation. So 2 close nearby congregations in a small city amalgamated, and so that helped to consolidate some of their costs. And another one of the congregations is looking at a partnership with a community group around using the church property for housing. Just looking in here, there was a concern that, and this relates to volunteers, that some of the governance requirements for communities of faith in the United Church's bylaws are a challenge for this particular community of faith to get leaders to fill those different roles on the different committees. It was also identified that there was one congregation has a fairly significant amount of money in a trust that helps make up the deficit, but that can also promote a sense of complacency. Having that there. Another congregation had a significant financial supporter, again, who it was a great blessing to have this person supporting the congregation, often covering deficits at the end of the year. But this person unfortunately has passed away, and so they're now in a challenge too. So yeah, I'm not sure how to summarize other than there was a lot of recognition of the things you were talking about, John.
All right. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. Carolyn.
Hi. I think a lot of common themes, sort of all of the above. We had 4 in our group, kind of a range of financial situations, from not sure about sustainability beyond 4 or 5 years to having money, but sounds like some decision-making paralysis around what to do with that money. Definitely lack of volunteers, whether it's for fundraising or for key positions like on council. A lot of council positions where people have been on council for many, many years. Let's see. I think, so my own church, we're in Guelph, Harcourt in Guelph. So we've got 4 United Churches in Guelph that we're trying to explore opportunities for collaboration and synergy and efficiencies there. We've been talking for quite a while, but we're hoping to make some more action in that regard. And there was at least one other person in the group. I think there were 2 actually that are having conversations with other churches in their area along a similar vein. I think somebody said that the volunteers can't see the future. And so in addition to being burned out, I think there's a bit of loss of hope in terms of stepping up to carry on. And one church that may be facing closure has concern about keeping the assets in the community if the church were to close. So that's it.
Thank you, Carolyn. Appreciate that. So what we're hearing is that there's a lot of commonality within the experience of those who are represented here. One note that I would make, and I see a comment here from David Shearman in the chat, not having a full-time minister is a new normal. That's true. It seems that there's a lot of part-time, but I know ministers are often seeking full-time employment. So if you can only offer half-time or less than full-time, let's say, it would be wise to look at a collaborative agreement to be able to offer a ministry personnel full-time work. I'd like to move on. And where are we here? Oh, yeah, so going through transitions, and again, let's be clear, I'm not talking about closing. We're talking about transitions, whatever that transition may be, when we look at and assess our future. these transitions in whatever we decide our future might be takes work, and it takes effort, it takes finances, it takes time. And there's a lot of feelings that we can go through. The point of learning about the signs isn't to depress everybody or have a loss of hope, but to help you start feeling in control of your choices, and hopefully about the options that are right for your congregation of the various options that are available. So the first is anxiety. I mean, we probably deal with this on a regular basis anyway. I know I do, but this is a feeling that is typical during times of transition. There's also grief, because transition means we're changing from something that was into something new, and there's grief in loss, the loss of what was, whatever that is. So grief can be a big part of feelings. Guilt can also be part of that, especially if the church is in decline and looks like it might close, or there's a lot of anxiety around that. It's not your fault. I think we need to recognize that the churches have been striving faithfully to do the work of the church. And there's a lot of circumstances that have brought changes in our society, in our structure, in the way volunteerism works, and all this kind of stuff. So these big changes are not things that are in your control. So recognize that feelings of guilt can be felt, but recognize that it's most often misplaced. Oh, frustration. Sometime in the process, because it's hard, you're in a circumstance of a lot of turmoil, and it's hard to get people to do the work or to find the financial support. It can be very frustrating for those who are doing the work of the church, especially when there's a lot of things to be done and few volunteers. Which is why I recommend reassessing your priorities and your goals, and what ministry initiatives are the most important and that you're most able to be able to do, so that you don't get frustrated. I've got two of my dogs having a little argument in the background. Overwhelmed. This is not a feeling that is we can be unfamiliar with either. There's a lot of stuff to do, regardless of which process you follow. It takes work, and so it can feel overwhelming. I would suggest reaching out to other congregations that have gone through transitions, or reaching out to the regional council for some support, or finding somebody to be able to vent to without judgment. These are all helpful things, and recognize that we can't do it all. So try not to wear too many hats. We can also feel resigned. Sometimes, especially in the life cycle of a church, if one gets way too far down the backside of the curve, that you're looking at closure and it seems very overwhelming, and you're feeling all these other feelings, you can definitely feel resigned. And we have had some churches that are thrown up their arms and said, "Here, regional council, take it over. We're done." And that's tragic, because it doesn't allow the congregation to go through the necessary processes and feelings and work toward a closure, in this case, with dignity, or toward whatever transition that might be with dignity. I think we also need to be hopeful. The news is not all bad news. There's a lot of reasons for hope too. There's lots of great initiatives happening. There's lots of talk about things that we haven't talked about or have been uncomfortable to talk about in the past, and we're being forced to now. And as difficult as it is, it's a good thing. One thing that planning ahead will do, and that's why we're doing this Vulnerable Congregations workshop, is if you find yourself in a place of vulnerability as a congregation, recognize that the more time you leave to work out decisions of what your future might be, whether that's, I'll talk about choices in a minute, but whatever the choice is, it's your choice, and you can be in control if you leave enough time. But if you don't leave enough time, then inevitably you're going to get frustrated, and some choices could be taken away from you. So it's important to be in control for the healthy closing or the healthy transition of any congregation. Brenna Baker is not able to be here, but she has provided a slide for the stewardship learning opportunities. So there are two coming up. One is bequests and estate giving on April 24 and May 8th. And setting up your giving program, ideally for teams that have done getting started. The getting started one I took off this list because we've missed the date for it in our for this workshop. If you want more information, you can contact Brenna Baker. It's bbaker, at unitedchurch.ca, united-church.ca. If you need information, please give me a call or email her direct if you can. All right, hopeful options. Let's talk briefly about that, and then we're going to break off into groups again. Wouldn't it be wonderful to discover that you are not vulnerable at all, or that you don't fit the highly vulnerable? So this is quite a possibility, and it's important to remember that even if you have markers that show great vulnerability, I think as Anne said, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to close. There's all the options are still in front of you. It's about being able to do the work and commit yourself to working through the processes, and it takes time. So you might find out that you're really not that vulnerable, or you've been able to turn around your vulnerability into hope. There are worship resources that are available. So there's things like United in Worship, where they send, is that the one that sends complete packages of worship services? I think that's it. But there's a number of different options that are United Church as well, that you can get sermons on video and PowerPoints and all that kind of stuff for your worship services. And there's lots of other resources that are available. Collaborative ministry. That's, as I mentioned, if you're less than full-time in ministry, with your church is less than full-time, then it might be good to talk about collaborative ministry so that you can try to establish a full-time position, which is more desirable for ministers. And collaborative agreements can be anything. It can be sharing a minister, as simple as that, or it can be sharing programs, sharing resources, supporting each other's programs, and sharing other staff, like an admin person or things like that. So collaborative ministry is an option, and we have workshops on that, and also information on our website. Stewardship, I showed you the stewardship slide already from Brenna Baker. There are stewardship programs that are available, and General Council has been doing a lot of work with that to help congregations support themselves. You can also look at reducing expenses and increasing income. There are various ways of doing that. The go-to should not be reducing hours from your minister. I would say look at other alternatives first, because less than full-time ministries struggle more than full-time ministries. That's just the way it works. Growth animator. We had an introduction by Greg Smith Young about himself and his new position as a growth animator. And so there are options at times to speak with him about what might be possible for your congregation. Rural Connect. This is the technology hub that allows participation in worship services at the same time. It's not just simply live streamed. You're actually participating with a number of different congregations, and each take parts of the service. there's a hub church, and then there are the satellite churches that plug in and share the services. So that's an option too. We have one functional hub in Western Ontario Waterways right now. It's in Southampton, and it's been quite helpful to them and to the churches that they have supported through the satellite locations. Amalgamation is a possibility as well. If you're thinking that your resources are low enough that a transition into something else might be helpful, you can join your resources with another local United Church. And the policy of the Congregational Support Commission, the Regional Council, is that in an amalgamation, normally all of the funds from the amalgamating churches plus the property, sale of property, all goes to the amalgamated church, so the new entity. So amalgamation is a possibility where you're then pooling resources and continuing ministry. That is ministry in the area of the amalgamated churches. And disbanding. Disbanding is the opportunity if you're not able to continue to offer a legacy, and that is a legacy that has some local implications and also some regional and general council aspects to it. So in disbanding, the current policy is 30%. The current once all the bills are paid, 30% of the proceeds that are left can be directed by the congregation to United Church Ministries. And if they have a local organization or charity that they have supported, it has to be charitable, and they can do what does the policy say? Up to the percentage of the donation of the last year to that organization based on your total income can be the percentage that you can apply from the 30% to an organization that is not United Church. But the majority will still be for United Church. So there is some leeway there. So that's disbanding as a possibility. And again, all of these take time to do well. If you're not vulnerable, maybe a question you can ask yourself, how can you help maintain a UCC presence in the area, which might mean being in relationship with other United Churches that allow for the joint support of ministry initiatives with churches that might be on the vulnerable spectrum. Is there a less expensive place to meet? Can you nest with another church? That's the sale of your own building and either renting space somewhere or nesting in another congregation. So you would still remain separate congregations, but you're working out an arrangement to use their building in the way that they use their building. So nesting. Talks around collaboration or increased rentals, property redevelopment, growth animator to help focus your ministry, amalgamation as being part of a new way to or a new beginning, and disbanding is a transition to a legacy ministry. And you really need time. Sometimes what would seem as a simple disbandment can take about a year. So, you know, you have to leave enough time to be able to do that and to be in control of the decisions rather than being forced to do things because of a lack of time or finances or people. I would like to I'm going to do 10 minutes in breakout rooms again. I'm not going to promise the same rooms, but if we can discuss, someone can take notes again, please. Which hopeful options do you think you might explore? And are there other options that could be considered? Brainstorm your ideas. So I'll give you 10 minutes in a room, and then we'll come back, do a quick debrief and a close. Yeah, I think that's everybody. Welcome back, everybody. And same as last time, I wonder if you could raise your hand for somebody who from each group would just like to speak for a moment, and I'll spotlight you. We'll make this brief, please. We have about 5 minutes left. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Okay. I think, well, we spent a little bit of time. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Thanks. We spent a bit of time talking about what sort of staffing models each of the churches had, like how many paid roles. Our church is working to develop a community hub to increase rental income. We did take the stewardship unit with Brenna Baker, but we're having trouble finding a volunteer to actually lead that team and those efforts. Some churches are saving money by having some tasks done by volunteers, and others are looking to collaborate with other churches in the area. That's it in a nutshell.
Great. Thank you very much, Carolyn. And we'll move to Colin.
Yeah, in our group, we have one congregation that's just on the cusp of entering into a collaborative ministry with another that will prove hopefully benefits for both congregations, financially and ministry wise. Another church that is looking into the possibility of creating a housing project to make better use of their property and hopefully a more profitable use of their property. Another congregation that different churches in the same town in the close area share special services such as Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday, and also youth activities and that. So it saves that duplication of services and gives their pastors a bit of a break at those busy times of the year. And a part-time outreach and youth person, a lay person also that have been hired to help facilitate those things. And we happen to have our worship animator in our group, so we're thinking we know a little bit more about what he does and might be able to take advantage of his skills and outreach as well. I think that pretty much covers what we have.
That's great. Thanks, Colin. And we'll move to Sarah.
So we took a little bit different approach. One member started talking about how the institution of the church really isn't working for our time anymore, but it provides a lot of possibilities and a lot of exciting changes of what that could look like in the future. And another individual had vacation Bible schools where they started collaborating with 3 other churches and with shared leadership to help spread across those volunteer issues, and working collaboratively even with different denominations within the area and doing work like that. And then obviously focusing on family ministry and maybe changing the way that looks for current family situations.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Anne.
We talked mostly about collaboration, both in the community and with other churches. One person talked about activities that they do in the community for special occasions like Canada Day, Halloween, Christmas, etc. But that's them out in the community doing things. They're now trying to talk about, so they had an innovation meeting this week to talk about ways to expand the community's knowledge of them. The other conversations around collaborative, one church is just beginning conversations with a potential partner. They're hopeful it will work, but this partner isn't as close as they would like it to be. Unfortunately, the closer situations don't need collaborate, so they aren't interested in talking. And another one was surprised that when they talk about sharing a minister with another congregation, that congregation doesn't want to give up their minister's time, and that's been an obstacle. So there's some protectionism going on, I think, around their ministers. That's about it.
All right. Thanks, Anne. And Roz.
Well, we talked about a cluster that has been going for 10 years, about 10 years. And there's it started with a whole bunch, like 10 congregations. Now it's down to 4. One which is in Antler River regional council, and the other three are in WOW. But this is a collaboration where one of the churches pays the minister and the other three rent the minister. That was what we were talked about. And so the minister goes around on a weekly basis from one congregation to the next. And the service, when that minister isn't there, is held by the lay folks in the community. And so it's a rotation base, and it has worked for some time. Apparently right now they're without a minister, but it seems very innovative what they've done. We talked also about collaborating in the community where, for example, there was a Pride event and all of the affirming congregations are collaborating to come together into the community and as affirming congregations, and youth groups. That's happening too, and discussions that are happening with lay folks in geographic regions to see how they might come together and collaborate, like joint services, things like that. So
good.
It's a great discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Russ. We have, we're past our time by 2 minutes. We have a couple hands up yet. With your permission, I have like 2 minutes of one slide left to wrap up. With your permission, we'll continue. If anyone has to leave, this is recorded and will be put on the website, so you can pick up the rest. I'll move to Yun Hee. You're muted, Yun Hee.
So we are the church, CHURCH. So when you remind the cross, you are, where are you? Your position is very important. You have to be in God. So we are serving God's community. So please think about what God wants us to do. Don't lose your hope. God is our hope. That is what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Yun Hee. Just in wrap up, please check out the toolkits on the Regional Council website. It's under the tab at the top on the website is called Tools, and you'll see stuff from the Human Resources Commission and Congregational Support Commission. We try to supply lots of tools that will help you. That should be the go-to place first for you to find information. And if you need some help finding it, or you can't access it for some reason, then please give me a call or email me. Yes, I can make the slides available. I'll do that the video will be available too, but I can do the slides as well. So you can also use the Community of Faith profile worksheets. That's toolkit number 2, and start identifying the signs. There's a 6-year financial viability worksheet, which asks lots of questions, and the living faith story about your future, and also the demographics worksheet. So please take a look at those. Use spiritual practices to help discern where the Spirit's leading. Like Young Hee said, we are part of Christ Church, and we need to rely on our guidance of each other and our sitting in the presence of the Spirit to try and discern our best way forward. And also reach out to the Regional Council commissions and staff for support. And aside from that, I would say, if you have any questions, great, feel free to reach out. And otherwise, blessings on your night. Thank you for attending this workshop, and you can look for it to be posted. And that's it. Thanks, everyone.